In 1 year, 15 women disappeared from the edges of the same American city. They did not share an address, a circle of friends, or a history, but they had one thing in common: a quiet man with a white cargo van who never broke the speed limit. He approached at night, offered cash, drove them to a suburban house that looked like every other house on that street, and closed the garage door on a world that would not see them again. What ended him was not luck or a stage sting. It was one woman who ran, remembered the right details, and refused to be erased. I am Santa, and this is the story of Marcus Hale and the survivor who led the city to him. Marcus Hale did not look like a threat. Medium height, ordinary build, plain brown hair cut close. He wore the kind of clothes that pass in any crowd: neutral jacket, sturdy boots, a cap with no logo. His van matched the uniform, white, unmarked, a model so common you could park 3 on a block and not notice any of them. He lived alone in a 1-story house with a maple tree out front and a driveway just wide enough for the van. The porch light was always functional, never warm. Inside, the living room was bare of personality, the kitchen tidy and almost unused. The basement was where the house told the truth. On shelves, boxes of nitrile gloves, coils of rope, duct tape in multiple widths, heavy plastic sheeting rolled like carpet, bottles of industrial cleaners with hazard pictograms. On the concrete floor, faint scuffs and a drain whose grate had been scrubbed more often than any honest home requires. In a locked drawer, prepaid phones with their stickers half peeled, key rings with no cars attached, cheap jewelry that did not belong to him. He did not call these trophies. He told himself they were records. It makes no difference what he told himself. The first disappearance came in late winter, as the city exhaled steam into the night and people hurried along sidewalks with their chins tucked into collars. Marcus cruised an industrial strip after midnight, headlights low, speed steady. He saw a young woman waiting under a flickering sodium lamp, offered cash for an hour indoors and a ride back. In the van, he spoke gently, almost apologetically, as if he were negotiating a delivery time. At the house, the garage door hummed down and locked the world out. In the basement, courtesy ended. He restrained her with the efficiency of practice, raped her, and strangled her with a pressure that was clinical rather than frenzied. He wrapped the body in plastic, loaded it into the van, and drove out past the last well-lit exit. On a logging road he had marked weeks earlier, he dug in frozen ground while his breath burned in the cold. He smoothed the soil and drove home before the sky turned gray. By morning, there was no report strong enough to stir the city awake. Silence emboldened him. He learned quickly that the system did not move as one. Reports filed in different precincts did not converge. Missing persons entries from women living week to week did not ring every bell in the building. Rain and time erased more than footprints. His method took shape: late night approach, cash offer, short drive with confusing turns, garage door down, basement, assault, murder, cleanup, a drive to a different site than last time, a shallow grave far from where anyone who loved her would think to look. He avoided cameras where he could, paid cash for supplies, wore gloves for everything, and never brought anyone to a motel. He told himself he was careful. He told himself he was invisible. He was not. By spring, 3 women were missing without a trace. By early summer, 5. The absence itself was the signature. Women whose friends told police. She was supposed to text. Women whose names sat on lists that were updated but not connected. In more than one file, the phrase white van appeared, but it was the kind of description that drowns in a city with 1,000 white vans and not enough eyes. A detective in missing persons drew a quiet line down the edge of a stack of folders and underlined dates that clustered on certain nights. The memo she sent up the chain was careful and easy to ignore. Marcus did not know about the memo and would not have feared it if he had. He considered the gap in the system a permanent feature. On a humid night in midsummer, the 11th woman fought him harder than most. In the basement, before he could tape her wrists, she clawed his cheek and left 3 bright marks. He finished what he had come to do, but he wore those marks for a week, answering with a half smile when a cashier asked what happened and a neighbor nodded at the scrape. He replaced the bulb over the basement stairs with one that cast a dull, yellow light, flattened shadows, and made the room feel like a photograph that had lost its depth. He upgraded the garage opener to a chain drive model that yanked the door faster and hummed low enough to mask other sounds. The hum became part of his ritual, a signal that he controlled the border between his world and everyone else's. The 12th and 13th went as planned. The 14th, too. He widened his range, moving between neighborhoods where no one would cross-check names. He parked the van facing out, so the turn to the street was quick and smooth. He learned which routes gave him long stretches without intersections, and he set a timer in his head under an hour from arrival to departure. He did not drink. He did not improvise. If the approach felt wrong, he waited for another night. If a cruiser idled in the distance, he circled the block and went home. He would fail when he decided he could not fail. In early autumn, as leaves gathered in damp clumps along curbs, Marcus rolled to a stop near a bus stop on a main road. Lena Carter was there, 26, eyes sharp from living by reading rooms quickly. He offered $300 for an hour inside and a ride back. Her jacket was too thin for the cold in the air, and the money meant security, 2 weeks of rent in a room with a door that locked. She noticed small things immediately. The way he angled the rearview mirror to watch her without turning his head, the faint chlorine smell that belonged to a pool and not to a van, the glove box latch that looked new. None of these were proof. Together, they were enough to raise the hair at the back of her neck. He took a route that braided right and right again, then left up a short incline, then right past houses with wide lawns and dark windows. He parked in an unlit driveway and clicked the opener. The garage door hummed down with that steady chain drive sound that would never leave her head. Inside, the house felt less inhabited than maintained. No framed pictures. No stray mugs on the counter. Down the basement stairs, the table, the coils of rope, the taped boxes, the rolls of plastic. She understood what was about to happen and decided if she was going to try to live, it had to be now. He stepped to block her path to the stairs. She drove her forehead into his jaw with everything she had. He recoiled. She ran. He grabbed her ankle, pulled her back down 2 steps, reached for tape. She kicked, connected with his shin, twisted, scrambled to her feet, and threw herself into the garage. The big door was down. She looked up and saw the red emergency cord that hung from the track, the manual release you pull when the opener fails. She jumped, caught it, yanked hard. The latch clicked. The door moved a few inches and stuck. She threw her shoulder under, pushed, scraped her arm raw, and slid into the cold. She ran. She ran toward light. At the end of the block, a convenience store sign with a dying fluorescent tube buzzed like an insect. She reached the corner as a patrol car's headlights swept across the crosswalk. She stepped into the beam and waved both arms. The cruiser braked, and the officer stepped out with one hand near his radio. Lena's words came in clipped bursts between shivers. White cargo van. 3 letters from the plate. She had memorized them while the door was coming down. Smell of chlorine. Chain drive garage door with a loud hum. 2 right turns from a main road with a bus stop. Houses spaced far apart. A convenience store sign that flickered at the end of the block. She could not name the street. The route had been a maze, and fear had unstitched the map in her head. But she knew the area. She knew the letters. She knew the sound. At the precinct, Detective Mara Donnelly took her statement the way you build something that has to hold weight level, steady, no showy joints. 3 letters went into the network that tracks plates read by fixed cameras around the city. The system returned a short list of white vans that had passed near the area Lena described in the last week. Property records and permit databases identified houses with attached garages along routes that would line up with 2 right turns from a main road with a bus stop. Service tickets from local garage installers flagged chain drive units installed or repaired in a tight cluster of blocks. When the filter settled, one name stood where the sets overlapped: Marcus Hale. Surveillance began before dawn. Unmarked cars rotated through the corners like a quiet engine that never stalled. The van came and went twice. Marcus walked to the mailbox and back. A dog walker paused, then kept going. On the third morning, Donnelly brought a judge a packet that would not wobble when pressed. Lena's sworn statement, plate reader hits matching the letters, garage service records, timestamps from the convenience store camera, cash purchases at a hardware store, plastic sheeting, rope, cleaners made on nights before several disappearances. The judge signed a narrow warrant, searched the residence, the van, the garage, and the basement, seized electronic devices and any containers reasonably likely to hold evidence of unlawful restraint, sexual assault, or homicide. They approached in daylight. Marcus opened the door with an expression he had practiced for clerks and neighbors. Donnelly presented the warrant. He stepped aside. The team moved in like a tide, documenting before touching, gloves on hands that changed often. In the garage, the concrete near the door showed faint drag arcs scrubbed nearly smooth. Shelves held degreasers and bleach-based cleaners. An evidence tech recorded the opener's hum. Later, the frequency profile would match the model installed. In the van, a removed bench left a cleaner rectangle in a field of duller paint. Near the rear latch, a long brown hair caught under a trim lip. A reagent brought up a faint spray pattern under a fresh coat of white paint in a seam. In the basement, they saw the table the way Lena had seen it, stripped of motivation and full of meaning. Rolls of plastic, rope, duct tape, boxes of nitrile gloves. In a storage bin, a zippered pouch. Inside, cheap hoop earrings, a dented charm bracelet, a lighter with the picture worn nearly blank, prepaid phones with dead batteries. In a drawer, more prepaid phones, some still wrapped, others with scuffed backs. They did not exclaim. They photographed and bagged and wrote chain of custody numbers that would survive cross-examination. Marcus asked for a lawyer. He got one. He said almost nothing. He asked once for water. He stared at the corner where a television might hang in another life. Donnelly did not sit across from him and ask why. She did not need him to talk. She needed the lab to talk. The hair in the van matched DNA from a woman reported missing in early summer. The blood trace under the fresh paint matched two other women who had not come home. Residue in the garage drain contained organic material that did not belong to Marcus. Soil in a seam under the van matched the composition of scrubland near an exit where, months earlier, a hunter had called in disturbed ground that no one had connected to anything. On Marcus's laptop, a folder disguised as invoices held maps of county land with small red X's far from trailheads. The oldest X lined up with the first disappearance in late winter. The newest had a date 2 days after Lena's escape. It was a schedule. Search teams took the maps and walked. The woods accepted everyone, but the ground had a memory. At one X, a patch where the topsoil felt wrong under a boot yielded the first grave. At another, a shallow rectangle offered bones and hair, and a fragment of fabric identified by a family later in a room with fluorescent lights. The day ended with more flags than anyone wanted to count. 15 sites across different distances, each one eventually connected to a name that had been a question and was now an answer that hurt in a new way. Procedure required a lineup even when logic didn't. 7 men stood behind glass, similar in build and hair and height. Each repeated a simple sentence recorded in the house when the garage opener had been tested, a sentence Marcus had said to himself, the kind of nothing phrase people use when they need to cover silence. 5 minutes and nothing ends. The tilt at the end of the line was more important than the words. Lena closed her eyes as each voice sounded. The fourth speaker dropped the final word just enough. She opened her eyes and pointed. She said, "That's him." It was not a guess. It was a memory hardened by the knowledge that other memories had been taken from her and would not return. The prosecutor did not write a play. The case did not need one. It moved like a machine that had been assembled carefully. Forensic matches that would survive a motion to exclude. The maps on Marcus's device. The items from the pouch linked to specific women. Paint layers revealing blood underneath. The opener's recorded hum matched to the model in his garage. Plate letters cross-referenced with reader hits near 2 disappearances. Receipts showing purchases before nights when women went missing. The testimony of a woman who did not know a street name but. knew the smell, the sound, and the letters. The defense floated theories the way one floats driftwood when the boat has already sunk. Secondary transfer, innocent hiking maps, cleaners for honest stains. The jury weighed each piece and then the structure. A coincidence can stand alone. A lattice of coincidences cannot hold weight. You could look for a pivot, the sort of television moment that transforms an investigation into a victory. Here, the pivot was small and real. A red cord yanked in a garage, a patrol car that stopped, a detective who looked for garage repair records because a survivor had mentioned a hum, a technician who treated a sound like evidence, teams that walked and dug where maps said to dig. The end did not arrive with a chase. It arrived with a door opening to a house that had nothing to say for itself, and a basement that said everything. The verdict came without theatrics. Guilty. Multiple counts. A sentence that means Marcus Hale will live the remainder of his life within walls he cannot choose, behind doors that open and close at other people's command. The van went to an evidence bay. The house's porch was laced with yellow tape until it wasn't, and then it was just another listing, and later another family will complain about the noise of the garage opener without knowing why the sound feels wrong in the bones. Lena did not become a symbol. She became a person who kept appointments and chose a seat facing the door and slept with the light on for a while and then off and then on again. She did what survivors do in cities that can only return part of what was taken. She kept moving. When she was needed, she spoke. When she was not, she did not. In her world, the hum of a chain drive is a weather report you can feel in your teeth. In the rest of the city, garage doors go up and down and no one thinks about them at all. The families of the 15 gathered in rooms with bad coffee and hard chairs, and names were read aloud by voices that cracked on syllables that held too much. Those names do not belong on this track because they belong to people who say them in kitchens and cars and quiet places, and do not owe the rest of us their grief. What matters for this record is that the names have answers now, and the answers reach the only place where answers matter in the end, a courtroom with a verdict that will not be undone. If you want to draw a map from beginning to end, it is simple and terrible. Marcus Hale targeted women he believed the city would not miss loudly. He brought them to a basement designed for control. He raped them and killed them and buried them, each time somewhere new. He made two mistakes that mattered. He approached one woman who fought early and hard. And he approached one woman who, even while fear stripped every street name from her mind, carried 3 letters from a license plate, the smell of chlorine, the memory of a chain drive hum, and a short, usable description of a neighborhood with a flickering convenience sign and a bus stop 2 rights off the main. Everything that followed came from that. Does it matter why he did it? It matters to him, perhaps, if he needs a story to tell himself as days become months, become years, measured by the squeak of a cell door. It does not matter to the record that brought him here. He did it because he wanted to control the moment when a person becomes silent. He did it because he learned that the system hesitates where it should not. He did it because he was not stopped earlier. What matters is that he was stopped, and how, by the ordinary work of people who did not look away from small facts, repeated often enough to become a wall. You do not need to remember the sound of a chain drive opener to understand this story, but it helps to understand how someone lives with it afterward. You do not need to walk the streets where the van turned right and right again to understand how a city fails and then keeps its promise the second time. You need only to see that attention, sharp, simple, sustained, and did something that planning and concealment built. A red cord, a plate fragment, a hum, a map with small red XS, a pouch that should never have been zipped. That is the spine. Everything else is muscle that moves it. Marcus will age in a place where the day is always the same and the only door that matters is controlled by other hands. The maple tree in front of his old house will drop leaves on someone else's lawn. The van will be stripped, measured, photographed, and eventually stored under a number instead of a name. The city will absorb the story, then dilute it, then forget parts of it as new stories arrive. The record will keep what it has to keep. The rest will live only in the moments when a sound catches in someone's throat for reasons they cannot explain. And Lena Carter will go on. She will buy groceries and answer messages and decline invitations she accepted easily before. She will recognize the shape of the van in her periphery in a way that others do not, and she will tell herself, correctly, that there are 1,000 white vans and only one that mattered to her. She will be asked, at times, to be brave in ways that are unfair. She will be brave, or she will simply be, and both will be enough. That is the story. 15 women, 1 man, a year that should have ended earlier and did not. A basement that told the truth when the rest of the house pretended not to know. A city that learned what it needed to learn later than it should have. And 1 woman who did not remember an address, but remembered enough to lead everyone else where they had to go. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.